This story will challenge your understanding of reality.
I've never had this conversation publicly.
Literally a game changer.
The mainstream media wouldn't touch it.
We are at a turning point in human history.
People's right to know.
There is a real phenomenon here. There's no question about that.
It's the biggest story ever, really, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
It's just incredible.
The Pentagon has admitted
Something is in our sky.
An unprecedented admission.
So extraordinary.
Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
It's engaging with him.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
There is video of that fleet.
this affects the entire world.
This is a global phenomenon.
Something quite incredible.
All governments will lie to the public.
The inside of the car was lit up.
You need to come with us.
This is a very real phenomenon.
This is coming directly from the Pentagon.
This, not of this earth.
Look at this thing.
We have no idea its intent.
You know, it was absolutely mind-blowing.
We don't know where these things are coming from.
We are well beyond reasonable doubt.
High-level officials are acknowledging this.
They are focused on our nuclear weapons.
Highly trained observers,
I was stunned to my core.
fighter pilots,
Circular.
radar data,
So extraordinary.
Iranian UFOs.
at the same time, at the same place.
The object knew where they were going.
I want to know the truth, Ross.
This is real.
There was something under the water.
And then all of a sudden, bam, it's gone.
This is the biggest story ever.
Are there other imagery that would blow people's socks off if they saw it?
Absolutely.
We're about 150 or 200 yards from the site. Everything else is just deathly calm. There is no doubt about it. We're seeing strange lights in the sky. It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. Yes, it's probably not has been. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. Pieces of it are showing off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird. What is it? We don't know, sir. Nickel 613, Roger.
It's the biggest question of all. For millennia, human beings have looked up into the sky and asked the question, are we alone in the universe? Well, in a few short weeks' time, a report's coming in here to the Congress that may provide at least the beginnings of an answer. We're at a really interesting time in history here where I think for the first time since World War II, the US military is actually quite openly admitting that there's a mystery it can't explain. And what we know is that there's a UAP task force, an unidentified aerial phenomena task force, which quite incredibly has been operating in secret inside the Pentagon, apparently for years, investigating the phenomena of UFOs, flying saucers. Strange craft in our skies.
Nickel 613, Roger. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. Look at that thing.
We may be looking at a situation where we've got to consider the possibility of intelligent, non-human life for the first time on this planet.
Ross Coulthart has been on a year-long investigation. Along the way, recording every moment, every revelation in a book and on camera. Searching for the truth via eyewitness evidence and unimpeachable experts about a subject once ridiculed but now being taken very seriously indeed.
I'm fascinated by the fact that for 50 years there's been a taboo, a deliberate stigma, ridicule attached to the subject of UFOs. People kind of giggle. There's a kind of an ironic smile that creeps across their face, and they immediately start talking about tinfoil hats. But the reality is, when you dig, there's a heck of a lot of evidence there to show that there's something very real at the bottom of all of this.
of the New Mexico desert a stone's throw from Roswell. Historian David Marler has been compiling a treasure trove of top-secret files spanning more than half a century. But it's what's been happening most recently, admissions from multiple high-ranking US officials about unexplained aerial phenomena, or UAPs, that has him most excited.
The recent admissions on the part of the U.S. government has been literally a game changer with regard to the subject and with regard to the perception, public perception of the UFO subject.
Why?
Well, for decades, the Air Force, FBI, CIA, all the official agencies had a policy of denial. Deny the subject, dispel the subject, debunk the subject.
Much of that culture of denial changed with the leaking of these tapes from the Department of Defense, or DoD, in 2017.
My gosh. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. It is LNS, dude. Well, if there's like anything.
Infrared images captured from on board the United States' most sophisticated fighter jets and Navy ships.
Topside, gust of 40.
Focus splashed. Splashed. Mark bearing and range.
Nickel 6-1 Tango Small J. Roger.
We have the sensing apparatus to detect objects. And as we found with the recent DoD videos, we are detecting objects. And they are highly anomalous in nature.
And they're not any known human technology
that we know of. We see this hyper-acceleration with complete absence of a sonic boom. We see the objects have the ability to hover and then rapidly accelerate in the blink of an eye. We used to hear these stories within UFO circles by UFO nutters, but we're hearing this from credible senior-level government and military officials that are all basically telling us the same story. And to what end? Why would they lie?
So who are the officials that you attach most credibility to by reputation, who you think have said interesting things in recent months?
I would have to say Chris Mellon.
Christopher Mellon was a very senior official, a Deputy Assistant Secretary in the United States Department of Defense in the Clinton and Bush administrations.
Have you heard about the Stevensville incident around George Bush's ranch?
But more recently, he emerged as the source who released to the New York Times those now famous videos.
So let's go through it very carefully. Are these objects intelligently controlled?
Some of them clearly are, yeah.
Could they be Russian, Chinese, or any other adversary
Conceivably.
country?
We're entertaining that possibility, sure.
What do you think?
The problem with that is that in some cases the performance of these vehicles is so extraordinary, it's so radical, that we don't understand how it's possible even. And so it's difficult for us to imagine how our terrestrial rivals could master that kind of technology.
In April last year, here at the Pentagon, the US Department of Defense made an unprecedented admission. It acknowledged that the videos taken by their fighter pilots of unidentified objects are real. So, if they're not ours, if they're probably not Russian or Chinese or any other potential adversaries, does that mean they're alien?
I think that we have to entertain that possibility.
Now, you realise that is just mind-blowing in its immensity. The implications of that are extraordinary. We're talking about the possibility of alien life visiting this planet.
It is, and it is mind-boggling. It's hard to process, it's hard to digest, and yet, as a matter of integrity, scientific integrity, we have to be able to look at the facts and follow them wherever they lead.
Where they lead us next is to this man.
My name is Luis Elizondo. I'm a former intelligence officer with the United States government.
For years, all lines of investigation led to him. the person the United States government put in charge of a secretive Pentagon unit called ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
What did you determine?
Well, I think it is very clear that our organization determined the reality of something is in our sky. We don't know what it is. We don't know how it works. We have no idea its intent and only seen some of its capabilities, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it right now. And I think that fact has been established, that this is a very real phenomenon. Now, what that phenomenon is still remains unknown.
But by definition, anything, any technology that is superior to yours in the American military is a threat, isn't it?
It is a potential threat. And for that reason, this is why it is a national security issue. If there is a technology that has somehow leapfrogged ahead of us, that has the capabilities that we're seeing, instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities, low observability, transmedium travel, and anti-gravity, and it has the ability to fly unimpeded over our controlled U.S. airspace at will, and there's nothing we can do about it, yes, that's a national security imperative. That is a problem. That is a potential threat.
If there is a threat to the US, and indeed to the world, it has been kept a very big secret for many, many years.
When we look at decades-long denials on the part of the U.S. government and military forces with regard to UFOs, they denied.
Then in December 2017, everything changed. One of the world's greatest newspapers, the New York Times, revealed the existence of a Pentagon unit secretly investigating UFOs. And even more extraordinary, it had the videos to prove it.
He saw this white oblong object, which he said looked like a Tic Tac, kind of zigzagging around over the surface of the water.
Leslie.
Yeah.
UFOs. Real?
Of course.
Leslie Kean was the journalist who broke the story after being let into secrets long buried by successive governments.
I mean, you were called and told to turn up, I think, to a hotel room somewhere in Washington,
Yeah,
D.C.
hotel lobby. It was a big meeting space in a lobby in
Who was
Washington.
there?
Chris Mellon was there, and of course the purpose of it was for me to meet Lou Elizondo, so he was there. I was shown these documents that blew my mind.
What were the primary revelations in that story that made people, probably for the first time, sit up and say, wow, UFOs are real?
Well, I think there were two. The first revelation was that there was a secret program within the Pentagon that had started in 2007 that had been studying these objects. So this had been for 10 years, secretly being studied. Now, you don't have a program studying UFOs if there's nothing to them. The second revelation was the Nimitz case that happened in 2004. There's a lot more to that case than we were able to report, but we got that case out there in the public.
On the day in question, November 14, 2004, the USS Nimitz was performing drills off the southern Californian coastline ahead of deployment to the Persian Gulf. Another ship involved in the exercise was the USS Princeton. Manning the radar on board the Princeton was Kevin Day. For him, it was a very important day, a chance to play war games.
We were going to do high-fidelity air defense training. We launched the good guys off the Nimitz, launched the notional bad guys off the beach, and they go at it.
But it wasn't the bad guys appearing on his screen that caught his eye. Instead, a formation of unidentified flying objects.
I thought it was civilian-related, and they didn't even know we were out there. The only reason why I became concerned with these is because of that air defense exercise. Captain comes down to comment, hey, sir, you know we've been tracking these objects for days now. If we launch aircraft and we hit one of these, someone's going to ask you and me both why we were so damn curious.
It's a very persuasive argument. What did the captain say?
He looks at me sternly, you're right, Senior Chief. intercept and VID, visually ID it. And Commander Fravor happened to be airborne, Top Gun train guy.
And as he began to close the gap, the Tic Tac recognized and began to react to his movement.
It sees him, and he recognizes as a fighter pilot that it's engaging with him. And so he's spiraling down like this, it's coming up to him. And he's in a dogfight, and he screams out to his colleagues, "I'm engaged!" So it's intelligently responding.
It is
to his
absolutely intelligent responding
So I
to
think
his actions.
that's very important, isn't it?
It is. Yeah,
it's not a dumb object.
Correct. And it began to take evasive maneuvers to counter and maintain distance between his aircraft that was closing in. By the way, an F-18 at the time, Super Hornet, one of the most premier aircraft on the planet at the time, and this thing had no problem keeping pace.
You're seeing whatever this object was.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on radar.
So you're picking it up on radar at the time.
I'm seeing him do the intercept, and as soon as he's at the merge plot, that object went from 28,000 feet to the surface of the ocean in 0.78 seconds.
And then all of a sudden, bam, it's gone.
Bing! Disappears instantaneously.
5 seconds later, you can do the math, one of the radar operators radios into the F-18 and says, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but the object is now waiting for you at your cap point."
The cap point was an aerial rendezvous point 60 miles away, known only to a handful of Navy personnel and pilots.
They go to their cap point. It's a secret. Nobody's meant to know this outside of the briefing room of the USS Nimitz. They get to the cap point, and what's there waiting for them? The Tic Tac. It's there. It's waiting for them. It knows they're coming.
The cap point, the meeting point in the air, where the planes were going. So there's obviously some kind of intelligence there.
I've had people explain this to me, some of the fighter pilots involved and some of the defence officials who've investigated this. They've said that it's the fact that it was flagging to the most sophisticated, the most highly trained weapon systems in the American military. It's literally poking its tongue out at them. It's saying, "I know you're there, I know where you're coming, your technology is hopeless against mine." It was showing its superiority to the most powerful country on earth. That was the decisive turning point for the US military.
The accelerations that were observed would destroy 5 or 10 times over any craft that we could design or build today.
No visible propulsion system.
No visible propulsion, no obvious signs of lift, no wings, no rudders, no control surface, no ailerons, no elevators, no cockpit, no rivets.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
There were radical maneuvers that just are impossible for us to perform and to conceive of. I mean, we just don't know how anybody can do that. We just don't understand it.
There has been successive revelations, statements made by active and retired members of the intelligence community and military, the release of the 3 DoD videos, and the acknowledgement that the phenomenon is real.
It's back.
It's back, hovering literally straight above the vehicle. And then it comes down over here. What we saw was not of this world. I think I was a surprise to them.
And they didn't want her to talk about it.
I wish I could be hypnotised and go back. Do you know what I mean? I really do.
I think something was just telling me just to keep going. I feel like it was there to do its thing. And when it happened, I didn't think that it was happening to me.
Destination Exmouth, Western Australia. On our way here, it feels less like another country than another planet, an alien landscape where it's alleged visitors from another world have paid particular attention to us.
Dear Sir, I hereby wish to report a most unusual sighting.
When it leaves, how quickly does it leave?
Probably 10 times the speed of a jet aircraft.
Oh, very, very fast.
Very, very fast. Planes can't fly like that.
It was definitely solid. An oval, the size of a car. I have absolute clarity of that memory.
What we saw was not of this world.
Under the watchful eye of the town's flightless guards, Ross Coulthard has arrived here to investigate the strange activities of something that's been flying above Exmouth. Down Under's very own Roswell.
It was God's town. It was really God's town. I mean, Exmouth is sheer paradise.
For many years, a tropical outpost of the United States on the edge of the Australian outback.
So every morning we'd say, God save the Queen, and then we would swear allegiance to the flag.
To the American flag in Australia.
In Australia.
Hiding in its star-spangled skies, some very dark secrets.
We saw an unidentified flying object, and the US military wanted to know what we had seen. They wanted it shut up.
It, whatever it is, seems to be interested in this place, on the edge of town. A heavily guarded military installation once run by the Americans. And just a few kilometres further out, one of the strangest structures in Australia. Built to radio nuclear attack orders directly to US submarines in the event of all-out war.
You couldn't pick a more remote part of Australia to locate this extremely secret military base that was doing communications with America's most dangerous nuclear submarines at the height of the Cold War. It's one of the last places in the country to see the light every day. And one dark night, 30 years ago, a young Australian who was living here, called Annie, had an experience that was to change her life forever.
It's approximately around about 8 p.m. I called a cab. They called at my house and picked me up. And we headed straight out towards space.
And we're following that route now?
Yes, correct.
How far is it out to the Harold Holt base?
Approximately around 5 kilometres.
So it's too far really to walk.
It is a fair way to walk, especially in very, very dark circumstances, and there's absolutely no lighting whatsoever.
You were how old at the time?
I was 25. It was just me, and I'd come out to catch up with good friends.
The good old boys here on the US base outnumbered women by 25 to 1. So, any chance to mingle was cause for celebration.
It was a brilliant night. It was a really good night. We didn't drink too much.
They had a great time, and then it was time to go.
One of the protective service officers that I was with that evening, he said, we're about to go on patrol, so we'll just pick you up and take you back into town.
In the car that night in 1991 were Annie and 2 officers from the Australian Federal Police.
The gentleman that's driving he's got his window down, he's starting to look out. And he looks at the other federal officer alongside of the other side of me, on the left-hand side of me, and says, "It's back, grab my camera."
It's back.
It's back. I'm asking over and over, what's back? What's back? And then he sort of looks at me, puts his camera down. He grabs me by the back of the head and says, "Look up." So I lean forward and look straight above the vehicle.
And what do you see?
I see a craft. I see a diamond-shaped craft hovering literally straight above the vehicle.
Are there lights?
Yes, there's lights at the bottom of it.
How big is it?
I would say 2 to 3 cars in length.
Any noise?
Nothing. There wasn't a single sound coming from this.
What colour?
Grey. Like it was a deep grey. Within seconds it shoots up, straight up in the sky, like faster than you could watch it, and then it comes down over here. Just like there 1 minute and then there, then there. But it's still even that. Even I can show you with my hands, but it still was faster than that. So they drop me on the edge of town, literally throw me out the vehicle and take off back.
And is that the end of it?
No. Well, I thought it was. I thought that was it.
Back home, Annie was shocked, struggling to make sense of what she'd witnessed. But her weird encounters were far from over. A few days later, another unwelcome visitor came knocking.
And suddenly 2 military police from the base show up. There was an air of, in their voice of, "You need to come with us willingly. And if you don't come willingly, then, you know, something more could go wrong there."
2 military police requested she accompany them to the base.
As we've rolled up, before we even got to the gate was opened for us. And whoever would stand aside and let us through. And then we indicated to go into the top security section of the base. And the minute we indicated for that top security section, I was thinking, wow, this is really serious.
Also hauled in for questioning were the 2 men who'd been with Annie that night.
She was in the company of 2 Australian federal police officers who were then known as Protective Service but are now part of the Federal Police. And those police officers and her were cross-examined, interrogated by American people in the base in the days following the incident.
In the centre of that room were sitting the 2 federal officers. There was 3 chairs. The one in the middle was vacant, and the 2 federal officers were in the other 2 chairs.
How did they look?
Their heads were bowed. They looked like they were broken. They didn't even look up at me as I was escorted into the room and asked to sit down in the middle chair.
And I have multiple witnesses to what transpired. I'm in no doubt whatsoever that it was a secret investigation by the Americans into what Annie says that she saw. And they didn't want her to talk about it.
Do you think the whole purpose of that event was to try and keep you quiet?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I think I was a surprise to them. I think I was a shock to them. And I think that they didn't know what to do.
I think her story has been consistent all the way through. She's got excellent recall. She's somebody who's got a very sturdy reputation in the jobs that she's done inside the WA Public Service. Nobody can lay a glove on her, I think, in terms of credibility. And more importantly, for other good reasons that I have that I can't discuss here, I'm very confident that what she's telling me is an accurate representation of what took place that night. Can you draw it for me?
Forever burned in my brain what we saw that night. So it was sort of like very elongated front of it, like very pointed. It come down almost like a diamond shape. But the end part was taken away from it. Had lighting, like, I would say the spine of it, and then on each wing. So when it come down to the left-hand side of us and I looked over to it, what I saw was it was long but then slowly come up to a shape like that and then back down. But in this was all cut almost like ridges in it, like a 3D effect almost.
the mystery of just what that object was that was seen hovering somewhere between this hill and that remote secret base still remains unsolved. I find that fascinating, and so do a lot of other people all around the world who've long been puzzled by the conundrum of unidentified aerial phenomena. It's something that has also been ridiculed and covered up for so long. So we've decided to follow the trail, to follow in the steps of the Americans here who took their secrets with them. We're going all the way across a continent and across the Pacific Ocean to their home country on the trail of the flying saucers. Can I show you an image?
Sure.
That our friend Annie drew?
Absolutely.
That's the shape that she says she saw hovering over the vehicle that she was in. Is it a familiar design to you?
It is. There's some slight variations, but what's interesting to note are the lights that you see here. One of the interesting aspects of these triangular reports are the lights are not little small anti-collision lights like we see with, conventional aircraft. They're usually described as large circular discs, if you will.
Like that?
Like this.
Is there a link between nuclear weapons, do you think, and these craft?
Yes, there seems to be a strong correlation between nuclear weapons, nuclear storage sites, and UFOs.
I've signed legislation that will outlaw Russia forever. We begin bombing in 5 minutes.
U.S. intelligence urgently canvass for signs of an imminent Soviet attack.
I think that something extremely anomalous and unusual is still happening up at Northwest Cape. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist. I have no idea what it is. But there is an anomaly that has been identified and witnessed by numerous people. And I know, because I've seen the files, it has also been seen on multiple occasions by people in our Defence Department. And some of those sightings reports are in our National Archives.
Every night, when the sun finally does set on Exmouth, it becomes one of the darkest places on Earth. But that darkness was punctured one night in February 2015 by a strange blinding light off the highway, which made young driver Nikolai Gordovich rethink everything.
It was very early in the morning. No one else was on the road. I was completely by myself. And I saw this light on top of a hill. It was pure, bright, white light. The only thing I could think of like that was if it was to do with the military. I have absolute clarity of that memory.
Forgive me, why didn't you stop?
I think something was just telling me just to keep going. And no, Exmouth is a place where it seems to occur.
When I was doing my preliminary research, when I went up there the first time, I had people walk up to me at the table when I was having dinner one night. They said, "Are you that journo that's investigating the flying saucers?" And I went, "Well, not quite, but I'm looking at the phenomenon." He went, "Well, good, because we've all seen it."
Adrian Arnold is another Exmouth eyewitness.
Adrian, at long last, good to finally meet you.
Hi, Ross. Good to meet you finally,
Good to meet you.
It was 1973 when he was 12 and watching a movie with friends at the local drive-in.
Between a break in the film, I just looked up, and when I looked up, I saw 3 dots that were sort of moving in odd patterns. They moved directly one direction very quickly, and then paused, and then moved in another direction.
Couldn't it have been a plane? A helicopter?
Not likely, not where this was. Planes can't fly like that. There was no way a helicopter could move at the speed that these 3 dots left.
So they're in the shape of a triangle?
In a triangle. And at times when they moved, the triangle distorted and changed shape, but it returned back to the flat.
It was almost like a 3-dimensional triangle, a diamond. Like the top of it was 3-dimensional, but no windows, just seemed to be a solid metal object.
Annie's sighting was in 1991, but her recollection of what she saw is as clear as if it were yesterday.
That's very interesting. We don't have many lateral views of them, though. The majority that I have are when they're over the witness or relatively high in the sky. It's not often we're afforded a view like this.
It literally came and hovered next to the car as it was driving along at 100 kilometres an hour.
So we're talking just a matter of feet above the ground?
Amazing.
That's interesting. One thing I will tell you, talking about close proximity to the Earth with many of these reports, I don't have one account of a triangle landing.
We are still transmitting on behalf of the Americans from Northwest Cape, and what happens there is cloaked in secrecy. When we tried to go there and film around the base, the Defence Department kicked us off.
Channel 7's out the back taking photos of possibly fuel, and it's going to get lots of people's attention, and it's going to raise a lot of eyebrows, and I would prefer you left.
They told us that we weren't allowed to film certain aspects of the base. It remains highly confidential to this day. In fact, I think we had to pull back to a hill which was about 10 kilometres distant. Is there a link between nuclear weapons, do you think, and these craft?
Yes, there seems to be a strong correlation between nuclear weapons, nuclear storage sites, and UFOs.
No question, they are focused on our nuclear weapons.
And you believe they're trying to send a message?
I do. I think the message is get rid of your nuclear weapons.
A world away from Western Australia, in the foothills of Southern California, retired US Air Force weapons operator Robert Salas is keeping a close eye on reports of craft appearing in the skies over nuclear installations like Exmouth.
In the 1960s, when he was the commander of an ICBM nuclear missile launch facility, he had the ability to independently launch nuclear missiles on America's enemies. Bob was literally the guy who pulled the trigger. But he realised that somebody else was playing a game with him, and it wasn't the Russians.
In 1967, with the US and the USSR engaged in the Cold War insanity of mutually assured destruction, the then 27-year-old was in charge of launching nuclear warheads from Montana.
If given the order, I would have launched those missiles. Essentially, we're talking about the end of civilization as we know it.
It was an order he hoped he'd never receive. And on March 24, 1967, he was underground in the weapons silo, sitting by a phone he hoped would never ring. But it did. On the line was a guard up top telling Salas he'd seen a menacing light in the airspace above the atomic warheads they were in charge of.
Screaming into the phone. He's very frightened, extremely frightened. He's babbling, shouting. I finally calm him down, and he says there's a orange-red light, large light, hovering above the front gate. And it's a pulsating light. He got all the guards out there with their weapons, and he wanted me to tell him what to do. It was, of course, crossing my mind that we were under some sort of an attack. And all of a sudden, we get bells and whistles going off. Klaxons, really, loud horns. And that happens when a missile goes down for any reason.
Simultaneously or one by one?
One by one, across the board. Boom, 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 boom. Something shut down the system.
With the arsenal rendered inoperable, Salas ordered the guards back underground.
What did they say they saw?
They saw UFOs. They saw these lights hovering above the facility.
You're freaking me out, Bob. I mean, this is scary.
The point is, these objects knew and know exactly how our systems work. And they are able to interfere at any point.
So you're describing clearly a non-human intelligence, vastly superior technology.
Yes.
Interfering with the most powerful weapons at our disposal.
That's what I'm describing. Yes.
You think it was alien?
I think it was off Earth, yes, or alien.
Technology was far outreach anything that we have. What we saw was not of this world.
Of course, there may be another plausible explanation for these sightings. That what people like Annie saw was not out of this world, but of this world. In other words, secret US military technology no one was meant to see.
I'll sort of show you something.
Remember, 1991 was around the beginning of America's stealth program.
Have a look at that.
That looks exactly like what we saw, except the top of it was cut, like had more cuts in a three-dimensional shape. Yeah, and that makes me feel extremely anxious because that's what we saw, except the tail bit was cut off the end there.
The really interesting thing about this is that this is a stealth craft called the Hopeless Diamond.
So you're saying that this could have been the Americans doing?
Well, if it is human constructed, it suggests that maybe the Americans were testing some kind of advanced technology over Exmouth.
I feel like I'm panicking, I feel angry. If that's the truth, then why would they have buzzed and followed that car? Knowing damn well that we could see that and then try to shut us up, that makes, for me, absolutely no sense, and it is infuriating.
Why is it infuriating?
Because, realistically, it's done a lot for my life for many years, and like the fact here that I don't even want to be identified.
You're worried about being ridiculed.
Oh, absolutely. So if this is real, why would they take us onto the base and question us like they did? And insisting that we tell people we saw a weather balloon. Does that look like a weather balloon to you?
Because you and two cops had stumbled across, if this is true, probably one of the biggest secrets in the American military.
Wow.
The testing of an advanced prototype aircraft or craft of some
Why would they be dumb enough to buzz the car?
You know, in 1989, the F-117A stealth fighter, the B-2 stealth bomber.
This was hovering. The stealth bomber doesn't hover.
No, stealth bomber doesn't hover.
This thing also showed hypersonic, instantaneous hypersonic velocity.
And with that, was there a sonic boom?
No. It was also whisper quiet. There was no noise of any propulsion system at all.
The vast majority of these triangular reports are silent. There have been people directly underneath one of these that look up, and they say, if I didn't look up, I wouldn't have known it was there.
Why would these objects, these craft,
be taking an interest in a place like Harold Holt Naval Communications Station?
Well, you know, these craft have shown the ability to disrupt communications. And so if it came to the point where we had to use communications from that facility, they could have disrupted those communications. I think this is simply a message to us humans to deactivate all of our nuclear weapons and basically go another direction, and also to learn how to live with each other in peace.
This is the largest group sighting of a UFO. It's not as if just one person saw it. There were over 200 people saw it.
It's effectively being wiped from history.
Be quiet.
I've spent far too long going through National Archives documents, but they represent a fascinating counterfactual history to the history that we've been presented in public by our Defence Department for the last 50 to 60 years. The Australian government holds thousands of UFO sightings reports going back decades, many of them once classified secret or top secret. And it might surprise a lot of people to know just how seriously those sightings were taken by military investigators, even though some of those sightings describe crazy things like hovering craft, flying saucers, black triangles. But there's one very secret report, which I know exists because I've spoken to someone who saw it being prepared, which isn't in these archives, and it should be. It's perhaps Australia's greatest UFO mystery of all.
Melbourne, in the sunny, suburban, swinging 60s. What a time to be stuck at school. Westall High School, a college of about 600 pupils in Melbourne's southeast.
I was a very young man in those days. I was teaching a year 9, I think it was, class, teaching science. Just before morning tea, the door flung open. A young girl rushed in.
Mr. Greenwood, there's a flying saucer.
Mr. Greenwood, there's a flying saucer.
The bell went, and I can remember running out into the oval, looking into the sky and seeing these things and just standing there absolutely transfixed.
When I looked up, I could see this object in the sky. It was directly over the far side of the oval.
Never seen anything like it before in my life, haven't seen anything like it since. Trying to absorb what we were looking at because it was just something so unusual.
It was your classic cigar-shaped object that looked like grey metal. That's what it looked like.
We got some of the key witnesses to quietly, independently draw what they saw. And they drew clear, consistent images of the same sort of object. What I want you all to do is to try and draw, as best as you can, what you saw that day.
Okay.
And no peeking.
The movement was incredible. Straight up, side, up, down, all over the place.
Was that
There's sort of like a hump on the top.
It's like a silvery thing like this, and it had like little lights around it. All lights underneath it around here, around the edges.
It's very interesting that all of you are describing roughly
are.
The same
There you go.
shape
There you go.
of object. Are you going to hold yours up?
There you
I mean,
go.
that's amazing. I mean, you all give a clear and fairly consistent account of a classic flying saucer.
It was a grey, almost cylindrical or cigar-shaped object which moved with some degree of precision in the sky.
Flying saucer?
I'm not going to say flying saucer, that's emotive language. But it was of the shape that you would see if you had a saucer slightly tipped on its side.
What's amazing about the Westall story is that it's as if it never happened. It's effectively been wiped from history. And yet, just down the road from this suburban RSL, 55 years ago, students, teachers, local residents looked up into the sky and saw what can only be described as a UFO, a flying saucer. And those people, those witnesses, are as sure today as they were 55 years ago about what they saw. Aren't you guys? Yes! At this time, as you're watching this, what's the reaction from the kids?
Lots of oohs and ahs. There's a significant number that then took off over the oval because it had moved, flown down apparently behind some pine trees.
I actually headed over to the corner of the school and jumped the fence and went into a place called the Grange, which is an area where we used to do our cross-country exercises, and ran towards where we had seen one appear to come down and land.
You actually saw one of the objects land?
Yes. Well, I didn't see it land, but I did see it on the ground in front of me. I could feel a heat and hear this buzzing sound, and I could see purple lights all around it. I no sooner got there, and within, I'd say, a minute, it just raised up off the ground really slowly, just kept on rising to probably about 3 or 4 metres, maybe a bit higher, and then it turned on its side and just almost just disappeared, just went straight up like that, and I looked up in the sky and I could see the other two. So it appeared to just disappear.
This is first-person evidence from people saying, I saw a craft, a mechanical object, intelligently controlled, hovering above me. That's good evidence. I think that's evidence that deserves to be taken seriously.
Within 40 minutes of the sighting, Air Force and Army personnel, look in their trucks, they were there.
You saw this?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Military turned up for sure. You're very sure about that?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And exactly what did you see? Men in uniform?
Yes. Yeah, I saw, and they actually, they had, it was like sentry guards at different points, stopping people from going into the Grange. But you got to remember, that was our backyard. If we wanted to get in there, we could.
And did you sneak in?
Oh, later on, yes, I did.
And what did you see?
The circular area, the trampled grass, and there were guards around it, and there were people in there with equipment.
What do you say to the fact that officially there is no government report into this matter?
Well, because they buried it, they hid it.
14 days later, Mr. Greenwood was paid a visit to his home by 2 men on official government business.
2 weeks later, a knock on the door, and when I answered it, there were 2 people there, one in plain clothes and then the other one, senior Air Force. Obviously senior, had a good many rings on his sleeve, and they told me that I was wrong, that I hadn't seen anything. And when I tried to explain to them that they weren't there, I was, and I knew what I saw. And, I think the first suggestion was that you'd be ill-advised to go on saying that because clearly you were drunk on duty, and that will have to be reported to the Education Department, and of course you'll lose your job.
They were threatening you?
Oh, absolutely. I was threatened.
You're describing officials from our government trying to gag you from telling the truth about what you saw.
Which is quite interesting when you realise that officials from another government 12 months later begged me to speak about it. The office of the President saying...
Let's be clear here. This is the President of the United States.
Yes, the President of the United States.
President of the United States.
The President had authorised the establishment of a board of inquiry or an inquiry to inquire into issues of unidentified flying objects, and that they were sending out somebody who I believe turned out to be Mr...
I think it might have been a Professor James McDonald.
James McDonald, that's the one.
Officially, he was working for the US Navy, but in his spare time he's checking many Australian reports of UFOs and comparing them with American reports. His aim is to see if the reports tally, in short, whether UFOs constitute a global phenomenon. In Melbourne, he's talking with Brian King.
Professor McDonald, what have you found here that's been of use to you?
I've investigated about 50 or 60 cases since I came down to New Zealand and Australia. Extremely interesting UFO sightings, essentially similar to those in the United States.
What are the main similarities?
Persons of really quite high credibility reporting unconventional objects, discs, cigar-shaped objects, frequently at very low elevation, hovering over sometimes urban areas, sometimes over cars, following cars.
I met this Professor McDonald. Basically, we did the same as I'm doing with you now, just went through the story.
And did he treat you respectfully?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Here, there is a recording of the interview.
You saw it there. Was it hovering motionless when you saw it?
Well, it did several things. It did hover at different times. It seemed to be able to accelerate and disappear out of sight, and then someone would see it over another part of the sky. It moved considerable distance very rapidly, and then it would move back again.
My recollection is that it was very much, he asked some prompting questions, and that's all. It was basically for me to speak.
And why did it disappear?
Well, this is one thing we just don't know. It vanished.
All of a sudden, while you were all looking at it?
No, it did one of these, accelerations, and then nobody could pick it up again. It's gone.
There clearly is a report somewhere.
What really strikes me is that 55 years on, these people are very certain about what they saw. And it just begs belief to me that in Australia, we've never had any official investigation. And flatly, I think there's been a cover-up. I really do. I think somebody has buried the Department of Supply report, which I know exists.
This is the largest group sighting of a UFO. This is the largest one in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's got to hold credibility because it's not as if just one person saw it. There were over 200 people saw it.
But there's one thing you are very sure of. Somebody was trying to cover the sun.
Oh, yes. And that is what I find most interesting of all, that I was definitely being told to be quiet.
America has recovered alien extraterrestrial technology, including spacecraft. How many, I can't believe I'm saying this, aliens are on board this craft?
16.
16 aliens.
Something go right over the top of us. I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing, moving really fast and went right over the top of us.
Every now and then in journalism, somebody will tell you something and you just don't quite know what to make of it. This is one of those times. Make of this what you will. I've been told here in America by multiple defence and intelligence sources, 2 former and 1 serving senior officials, something quite amazing, that America has recovered alien extraterrestrial technology, including spacecraft. And one of them was recovered from near here. And if that's not enough, they're also talking about alien bodies. For years, I've been interested in a lot of these crazy-sounding cases of
US military secretly recovering alien spacecraft from parts of New Mexico, Nevada and Utah. So I met and interviewed a while back for my book, Scott and Suzanne Ramsey. Scott found out by accident from local Navajo Indians talking about the crash site. And so as a husband and wife couple, they have done some phenomenal research.
Well, on March 25th, 1948, oil workers discovered a lenticular craft laying up here after being called out because of a brush fire. And they came up and found this large object, about 18 feet tall, just short of 100 feet across.
Now you're testing me here. You're saying an alien spacecraft with multiple dead aliens on it.
Yeah.
16.
Was discovered here.
That's right. When we started this process, it was insignificant whether it was positive or negative, the results. We wanted the truth. And it has led us in the direction that we firmly believe that it occurred.
So what happens? They discover a craft. How many individual dead, I can't believe I'm saying this, aliens are on board this craft?
16.
16 aliens.
16. They were between 3.5 feet to 4 feet tall. They were perfect teeth. They were childlike in appearance. They had jumpsuits on that were like a powder-colored blue. They were charred, blue uniforms on, nothing that would signify rank.
What really fascinated me was that there was a claim that saucer craft, whatever it was, had hit another mesa on the way. And we were privileged to be able to meet the granddaughter of the man who saw that craft hit that hill, a woman called Krista. And to test her claims, she very kindly agreed to come with us to the top of a 7,500-foot mesa, which is an expedition I will never forget. We went to the very top of the hill and she pointed out to us the rock that in family folklore her grandfather said was the rock that the craft hit, this massive craft hit, and then kept on going after it hit that object, that rock.
He said that it was wobbling, and when it hit the rock over here, it was wobbling, and before it hit the rock.
So it was obviously out of control.
It was out of control, absolutely.
Wherever they were from, they and their craft ended up right here.
You've actually spoken directly to people who saw this object.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you believe them?
Yeah, absolutely, I do.
And so John, our cameraman, put his drone up, and for the first time we got drone vision and photographs of this mark on this bit of rock. And I don't know for sure what it is. I'm not a geologist. I'm not somebody who can qualify to look at rocks, but it does look like something's hit that rock. And whatever it was very large and very strong because it seems to have taken a gouge out of the rock face. Who else turns up?
The military, late morning, early noontime.
They took it to the Los Alamos Nuclear Laboratory.
That's my opinion.
So let me check this. You've got witnesses who say that they've worked on a recovered alien spacecraft, and that the United States government is trying to re-engineer that technology.
At least to understand how it works.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that the United States military somewhere has recovered alien materials?
I think there's a strong possibility of that, yes. And I've spoken to sources who have basically said that, yes, and I trust these sources.
This is a reality.
It is mind-boggling. It's hard to process. It's hard to digest.
I think we are at a turning point in human history.
Whether you believe or disbelieve, it doesn't matter.
Eventually, all of us are going to have to face it.
What does it mean to be a human being?
The question is, who or what exactly is it? And that is the big question. It could be something that's always been here, that's just as natural as you and me, just as natural as that, and we're just not at the point as a species where we're beginning to collect the information and be able to interact. This enigma requires data. It requires courage to ask the hard questions. And ultimately, what we really might have to wind up asking ourselves, what does it mean to be a human being?
Nervousness and fear about it. I mean, what are the implications of this? I don't think everybody wants to face that.
I am absolutely certain that this is a reality. Eventually, all of us are going to have to face it.
Suspending in any ideology, any belief in UFOs, whether you believe or disbelieve, it doesn't matter. Ignorance is not an option.
This issue will challenge your understanding of reality and your notions of reality.
I think it's possible the U.S. military is in possession of either materials from a spacecraft or a craft itself. That is the biggest story, and that's the cutting edge, I think, of what we need to know more about.
It is mind-boggling, it's hard to process, it's hard to digest.
If there is an alien civilization waiting to show itself to humanity, if there is some kind of consciousness that's been with us that's not human, that is sentient, that's always been here, whatever it is, it's exciting because it redefines our understanding of ourselves in the universe. It's going to turn religion, cosmology, science on its head.
This is a conversation that impacts every one of us equally and yet differently.
Nickel 6-1 thing. Roger, Roger, there's troubleshooting. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
Yeah, we have 31 knots sustained. We're topside, gust of 40.
What was splashed? Splashed. Mark bearing range. My gosh. We're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's a thing, it's rotating.
We may be on the threshold of getting some answers within our lifetime.
I think we are at a turning point in human history.
It's absolutely real. There is a real phenomenon here. There's no question about that.